everybody, it's your old pal Scruffy, and today I have on my New Year's hat. Feliz Año Nuevo, amigos!
Oh, Scruffy, I'm so excited to see you today, and I'm so glad to be back with our friends. Are we ready to get started?
We sure are.
Well, buenos dias, ¿cómo estás?
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias.
Muy bien, gracias.
Y tú?
Y tú?
Good morning, good morning.
How are you?
How are you?
Very well, I thank you.
Very well, I thank you.
How about you?
How about you? Well, Scruffy, I'm really excited about our story today. What about you?
Yeah, because it's about animals, and I love animals. Even fuzzy humans like animals.
Right. What's your favorite animal, Scruffy?
Well, I really like dogs best. They're my favorite animal. They're like my spirit animal since I'm a fuzzy human.
Oh, okay, Scruffy. We'll have a talk later about that.
Okay. Well, today's story is about a special horse named Hans, and he was so smart. Maybe not as smart as me and you, Miss Shelley, but he was really smart.
Oh, okay, Scruffy. Well, I can't wait to hear all about him. And I hope our friends at home are excited to hear about him too.
Well, adios, amigos. I'll see you in just a bit.
Thank you, Scruffy. Well, now that Scruffy's gone, I can take my mask off, right? Oh, I sure hope so. But I do need to put on my trusty reading glasses. Ooh, Miss Shelley's hair, I'm looking a little bit messed up today. But I do need my reading glasses on because, ooh, friends, as you get older, your eyes can really mess up on you. I'm telling you what. Well, today we have a true story called Clever Hans. The true story of the counting, adding, and time-telling horse. That's right, friends, a horse who can count, add, and tell time. I know, right? It's amazing. Well, we are going to read it today, and friends, I hope you will enjoy this book. I think it's going to be so amazing. Can you believe a horse can count and tell time? I know, it's amazing. Well, let's get started. Hopefully you can see it well. I know the glare's a little off, but anywho. Crowds gathered almost every day to visit a handsome horse named Clever Hans. But people didn't come because he was handsome. They came to see the amazing things he could do. His owner, Mr. Wilhelm von Osten, had taught him to do much more than run or prance. He had taught him to do things only humans should be able to do. And the audience could hardly believe what they were witnessing. That's right, friends. This horse was very special. So this was in 1904 in Berlin, Germany. So how many years ago was that? That was 117 years ago, friends, because we are now in 2021. So this story occurred about 117 years ago. Here we go. Let's find out more about old Hans. Whoops. Mr. von Osten asked Clever Hans how many people had umbrellas. Hans nodded to show that he understood the question. He lifted his right foot and tapped his hoof to the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. He was right. 5 people had umbrellas. Mr. von Osten asked Clever Hans what time it was. Clever Hans nodded. He tapped his foot 12 times, paused, then tapped 10 more. He tapped, and they said, wonderful, wunderbar. Right again. It was 12:10, friends, so he was right on the time. Could a horse really count and tell time? It seemed Clever Hans could do that and more. Clever Hans named colors by picking up pieces of colored cloth with his teeth. He tapped out the values of different coins. He answered math questions, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and even fractions. This is one smart horse, friends. He pointed his nose to specific words Mr. von Osten said. He spelled by using a chart where every letter equaled a certain number of taps. He even knew more about music than most people. Wow, he's really clever. Newspapers said that Clever Hans could do almost everything but talk. The idea of an animal having human intelligence went against the way people thought the world worked. Many couldn't believe till they saw clever Hans with their own eyes, and others still couldn't believe or didn't want to. So before they saw him themselves, they were like, no, don't believe it. Nein, nein, which means no in German. After, we have one believer, yeah, but we still have somebody that says, nein, I don't believe it. But Mr. Von Osten had always believed. He had been working with Clever Hans for 4 years. He taught Clever Hans much like he had taught his human students when he was a school teacher. He spoke to the horse and explained his teachings using chalkboards, flashcards, and number boards. Wow, that Clever Hans, what an incredible sight. Clever Hans was a hard worker. He sometimes got tired of the constant questioning, but he liked the bread, carrots, and sugar cubes he received as treats. Both the man and the horse were excited to show the world what they had accomplished. Mr. Von Osten placed advertisements in newspapers inviting people to witness experiments testing the mental powers of a horse. He didn't want them to be seen as performers or entertainers, so he never charged people money. Wow, so entrance was free, but he wanted people to see this amazing Clever Hans. Scientists, scholars, and religious and military leaders from around the world jumped at the chance to see Clever Hans. Some thought he was as smart as a person. Others were sure it was a trick. Each person was sure their opinion was right, and each thought the others lacked common sense. A well-respected scientist named C.G. Schillings was one of the people who doubted Clever Hans. He thought Mr. Von Osten gave Clever Hans secret hand signals when he reached into his coat pocket for the horse's treats. Mr. Schillings asked if he could question Clever Hans himself. To his surprise, Mr. Von Osten extended a hearty welcome, and why wouldn't he? Mr. Von Osten was happy to have the chance to prove Clever Hans's intelligence. Mr. Schillings questioned Hans for many weeks. I have a number in my mind. I subtract 9 and have 3 left over. What is the number? If the second day of the month comes on a Tuesday, what's the date of that Friday? Time and time again, Clever Hans answered correctly. Wow, Mr. Schillings became a believer. That Clever Hans is so clever, friends. But not everyone did. Some thought Mr. Schillings was in on the trick. People were more divided than ever. Newspapers debated. The German government asked a second scientist named Karl Stumpf to pull together a team to study the work Mr. Von Osten and Mr. Schillings did with Clever Hans. Mr. Stumpf gathered 12 other experts, including psychologists, teachers, zoologists, a circus manager, a count, a cavalry officer, and a veterinarian. Day after day, they watched Mr. Von Osten and Mr. Schillings work with Clever Hans, but they saw no secret signals or other signs of trickery. Newspapers stated that the experts thought Clever Hans could really think and communicate like a person, but this wasn't exactly right. The scientists said it wasn't a trick, but they still didn't understand just how Clever Hans was able to answer all the questions. They needed to investigate further. What could it be? Mr. Stumpf brought in his assistant, Oscar Wunst, to test Clever Hans. Mr. Wunst tried to come up with new theories about how a horse could possibly do all that Clever Hans could do. Could Clever Hans be getting the answers from someone in the audience? Mr. Funks decided to question him in a way that no one knew the answers ahead of time, including Mr. Funks himself. Mr. Von Osten whispered a number in Clever Hans's ear that no one else could hear. Mr. Funks did the same. Then he asked Clever Hans to add the 2 numbers. When asked this way, Clever Hans seemed frustrated and answered the questions wrong. Maybe this meant that Clever Hans was a psychic mind reader. Wow! If the people didn't know the answers, he couldn't read their minds. What would happen if the people knew the answers but Clever Hans wore large blinders so he couldn't see? Could Clever Hans really read their minds? When Mr. Funks questioned the horse this way, he noticed two very interesting things. Number one, Clever Hans tried to move so he could see people, especially Mr. Funks. Number two, Clever Hans answered the questions wrong. So this is while he had the blinders on, friends. So now, Mr. Funks knew Clever Hans needed to see people, and he needed the people to know the answer. But why? Mr. Funks just couldn't figure it out. But then he thought of something he hadn't studied yet. Himself. He paid careful attention to his own actions when he questioned Clever Hans. Mr. Funks noticed that after he asked a question, he got a little tense and leaned forward a tiny bit to watch the horse answer. When Clever Hans reached the right answer, Mr. Funks would relax a little and look up slightly. He studied other people questioning Clever Hans and saw the same thing, even though it was barely noticeable. Did Clever Hans notice this too? Did he use these signals to know how to answer? Look at this lady. When she asked a question, she had a head tilt until he got the right answer. This guy scrunched his eyebrows, drooped mouth, raised shoulders, and hands to face. Mr. Funks had to test his theory. Could Clever Hans be led to answer incorrectly if Mr. Funks purposely relaxed and lifted his head slightly at the wrong answer? Sure enough, it worked. See, he's got the number 2 here, but what does Clever Hans answer with? 3. Mr. Funks also pretended to be Clever Hans. People asked him questions he didn't know the answers to. He watched them as he tapped with his hand and tried to guess when to stop. Sure enough, this worked too. Clever Hans was clever all right, just not in the way people first thought. Mr. Funks concluded that everyone around Clever Hans had been giving him the answers by changing their body language when he tapped the correct number of taps. Clever Hans noticed clues people didn't even know they were giving him. In a way, Clever Hans had outsmarted them all. But Mr. Von Osten was so sure about Clever Hans's intelligence that he never accepted Mr. Funks' explanation. He kept on showing Clever Hans to mystified audiences. Some people continued to believe that Clever Hans was figuring out the answers on his own, but most challenged themselves to see the signs that Mr. Funks said Clever Hans knew, and were equally amazed that Clever Hans noticed these cues. Either way, Clever Hans was a clever horse indeed. And if you look on our link from the lesson that I posted today, you will see a Clever Hans video. Isn't it so amazing that this horse could do all of these things? Maybe you could teach your own animal at home to do that. If you have a dog or a cat, you might practice that as well and see if your dog or cat might notice when they get to the right answer. They might notice a difference in your body language or your facial expressions. Pretty interesting, huh, friends? So I hope you enjoyed our story about Clever Hans today. I think it's such a cool story, and you know Miss Shelley loves stories about animals. So I'll post some videos in the links on our storyboard today, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And don't forget, we've got to have Scruffy. Let me put my mask back on since Scruffy's coming back. Scruffy, are you here?
I'm here. Come on, Miss Shelley.
Oh, here we go, Scruffy. Well, I que decirle adios a mis amigos. I que decirle adios a mis amigos. Es tiempo de decir adios.
It's time to say goodbye. It's time to say goodbye to all my friends. Adios, amigos!
Thank you, Scruffy. See you next time, friends.